right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into John Green's Turtles all the way down.
Yeah.
And, maybe you're here because you're trying to figure out what all the hype is about. Maybe you're, trying to decide if you even want to read this book. So hopefully we can give you a little taste of what it's all about without, giving away too much. We've got some great sources for this deep dive. We've got Wikipedia. We've got some really in-depth reviews, and we've even taken a look at John Green's own website.
Yeah, as someone who's always loved YA fiction and Green in particular, I think this is one of his books that just really sparks conversations and makes you think.
Yeah. Okay, so the premise alone kind of hooked me. We've got Aza Holmes. She's 16, battling OCD, and somehow she gets wrapped up in investigating this missing billionaire.
Huh.
And there's like $100,000 reward out there. And part of me is thinking like, oh, this is just, like a classic teen mystery. But then when you start reading the reviews, you see that there's this really profound exploration of mental health going on. So I'm curious, like, does the mystery element just serve as a backdrop for that? Or does it really like weave into these deeper themes?
Well, it's interesting because the mystery actually becomes this metaphor for Aza's internal struggle. Like
It seems.
literally, the missing billionaire and the search for him kind of parallels the chaos that she feels inside her own head. And then the reward, that represents this kind of fleeting hope for a quick fix that so many people with mental illness are searching for.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a really cool connection. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
So we know Aza has OCD. For somebody who might not really know what that's like day to day, could you maybe give us a glimpse into her world?
Sure. I mean, Green is very honest and raw in his portrayal of OCD. It's not just about liking things to be organized. Azaz is really trapped in these thought spirals, these invasive thoughts that she can't escape. And her compulsions, like constantly reopening a Band-Aid to check for infection. These aren't just little quirks. They're her way of trying to control this overwhelming anxiety.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely way more than just, oh, she likes to be tidy. But it also makes me wonder, like, how relatable is this? You mentioned that Green draws on his own experiences with mental illness.
Yeah.
Does that authenticity come through even for readers who haven't personally dealt with OCD?
Absolutely. You can just feel the honesty in Azaz's voice. And there are these moments where he describes her thought process so vividly that you really understand what she's going through. Like there's this one passage where she's talking about her fear of the human microbiome, all the bacteria that live inside us. And it's so specific and so visceral, you really get that for her, this is not just some abstract idea. It's a terrifying reality.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that definitely paints a pretty vivid picture. So you've got this intense internal struggle going on, but then there's also a lot about her friendship with Daisy. How does that dynamic play out? I mean, especially with the OCD as a backdrop.
Eliza and Daisy's friendship is actually one of the most realistic and heartbreaking portrayals I've seen in a YA novel, because Daisy is trying to cope in her own way. She escapes through writing Star Wars fanfiction, which Eliza just can't relate to. So there's this conflict there, but also this deep need for connection on both sides. And then there's this car accident that happens.
Oh, a car accident. So is this where the mystery starts to heat up?
It's not so much about the plot twist. It's more about how the accident becomes this turning point for both of them. This moment where they have to confront their own vulnerability and the fragility of their friendship. Like, it's less about the external events and more about the emotional wreckage that can happen even in the closest relationships.
It's kind of crazy how the accident becomes this internal thing.
Yeah.
Instead of just like a plot device.
But speaking of big moments, the book itself seems to have made a pretty big impact. I mean, it was a #1 New York Times bestseller. It won awards. There's even a movie. I mean, that kind of response has got to be about more than just a cool mystery, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think what really resonated with readers was just how honestly Green portrays mental illness. He doesn't sugarcoat anything.
Yeah.
But he still manages to bring in these universal themes like friendship, love, and, that whole search for meaning. And it all feels so personal and relatable at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, this might be a dumb question, but what about the turtles? Like the title is Turtles All the Way Down. It feels symbolic, but I'm not really getting it. Oh, that's a great question. So the Turtles All the Way Down thing comes from this old cosmological myth. The idea is that the Earth is on top of a giant turtle, which is standing on another turtle, and so on forever. And it kind of represents this idea of recursion, these endless cycles, which is kind of like what's going on in Az's head, right? Those thought spirals and doubts. It's like there's no solid ground, no end in sight.
Whoa. Okay, that is way deeper than I was expecting. So the turtles represent this feeling of being stuck, which is actually a pretty clever way to tie the title to Azaz's internal struggles. But it also makes me think about the ending. Does the book offer any kind of resolution? like a way to break free from those cycles.
That's what's so interesting about Green's approach. He kind of challenges that typical YA idea of a happy ending, where everything gets wrapped up perfectly. Instead, he gives us something that's more nuanced and makes you think. Aza doesn't just magically overcome her OCD, but she does learn to deal with it, to find moments of peace even when things feel chaotic.
It's like the journey is more important than the destination in a way. Which kind of brings us to the film adaptation. I'm always curious how stories that are so internal get translated to the screen. Like, can you really capture those thought spirals and that constant anxiety visually?
It's definitely a tough thing to do. You can't just rely on dialogue to show what's happening inside a Tosa's head.
Hmm.
The film has to find ways to make those anxieties visual and to really make the audience feel what she's feeling.
Right. You need something more than just her saying, I'm anxious. So did they pull it off? Did the film capture the heart of the book?
Opinions are kind of mixed on that. Some critics thought it simplified Asaya's struggles too much and focused too much on the mystery aspect. But others really liked the visual metaphors and the performances. They felt like they did a good job of conveying the emotional weight of the story.
So maybe it depends on what you're looking for as a viewer. If you're expecting a word-for-word adaptation, you might be disappointed. But if you're open to a different interpretation, a more visual way of exploring the themes, then there might be something there for you.
Exactly. And it's always interesting to see how different art forms tackle complex issues like mental health. What works in a book might not work on screen and vice versa.
So for our listener today, someone who's trying to decide whether to check out Turtles All the Way Down, what would you say are the main takeaways? What makes this book stand out from all the other YA books out there?
Well, first, there's Green's really honest and raw portrayal of OCD. He goes beyond the stereotypes and shows us the reality of living with this condition. Then there's the exploration of friendship, how even strong bonds get tested by mental illness. And finally, there's that challenge to the idea of a traditional happy ending. Green embraces ambiguity and reminds us that life doesn't always tie things up neatly.
That's a great way to put it. And I think it leaves our listener with a lot to think about. In the end, the best way to understand this book is to experience it yourself.
I totally agree. Turtles All the Way Down is the kind of book that stays with you long after you finish reading. It's not just entertainment, it's an invitation to think, to feel, and to connect with something deeper.
It's really interesting how people connect with this book in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Like, some people are drawn to Aza's struggles, some people are into the mystery aspect, and then some people, like me, are kind of fascinated by all the symbolism, the deeper meaning. Like, Green created this book with all these different layers, so there's something there for everybody.
I think that's a great point. It shows how powerful literature can be, you know? It can meet us wherever we're at. Like maybe we're initially attracted to one aspect of the story, but then we discover something totally different that really speaks to our own experiences.
Exactly. And that's what makes a book truly great, when it sticks with you. And it makes you think about things in a different way.
Right. And I think Turtles All the Way Down definitely achieves that. It's a book you can read multiple times, and each time you discover something new.
So for anybody out there who might still be on the fence about reading this book, what would you say to convince them to give it a shot?
I'd say if you're looking for a book that will challenge you emotionally and make you think and stay with you long after you finished it, then Turtles All the Way Down is definitely worth checking out. It's a story that embraces all the messiness of life and the complexities of mental health and the importance of human connection.
Well said. And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Turtles All the Way Down. We've covered a lot. Aza's struggles, the whole mystery of the missing billionaire, her friendship with Daisy, and all that thought-provoking symbolism that Green weaves throughout the story.
Yeah. We've also talked about why the book was so critically acclaimed and how it was adapted into a film and why it continues to resonate with so many readers, even today.
So hopefully this deep dive has given you a better sense of what this book is all about and why it's such a powerful and impactful story. And if you're intrigued, we definitely encourage you to pick up a copy and explore Aza's world for yourself.
You might be surprised by what you find.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for today's deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another exploration of something fascinating. Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those thought spirals spinning. In a good way, of course.